I'm Jennifer Zworski, and today my partner and I will be arguing against the affirmative side that animal experimentation should not be abolished in the United States. So their first claim is that animal testing should be abolished because it is inhumane toward animals. And I would like to counter that by saying that animal research has produced many key medical breakthroughs that prevent many unnecessary human deaths. So it's kind of the price we have to pay, like sacrifice a few lives of animals to save hundreds of thousands of human lives in the future. So a quote from David Hogan says that our first obligation is to our fellow humans. I think it follows that we owe it to our fellow man to alleviate the pain and misery of disease through biomedical research. And animal research has helped scientists to understand many different diseases and to learn how to prevent them and just learn more about them. For example, diseases that are no longer widespread, such as polio, but also diseases that are currently do not have cures, or they already found cures in the present, such as heart disease, diabetes, obesity, neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, cancer, AIDS, tuberculosis, and Crohn's disease. And some other things that animal research has done to help humans is that it helped for insulin to heart transplants to vaccines. So, and many of us would now be dead if it wasn't for these experimentation on animals. And explains former American Medical Association President Daniel Johnson, who is a doctor, animal research followed by human clinical study is absolutely necessary to find the causes and cures for so many deadly threats from AIDS to cancer. So, I mean, it really is just a trade-off to see, like, we have to sacrifice some animal lives in order to be able to save so many more human lives. And so their second claim was that the AWA fails to protect animals and does not include, it just fails to protect animals. So the Animal Welfare Act regulations define an animal as any live or dead dog, cat, non-human primate, guinea pig, hamster, rabbit, or any other warm-blooded animal which is being used or is intended for use for research, teaching, testing, experimentation, or exhibition purposes. And so my opponent claimed that the AWA does not include rats and mice, but I have a source that says that in 2002, the passage of the Farm Security and Rural Investment Act, also known as the 2002 Farm Bill, amended the AWA's definition of animal, which I just read, to include rats, mice, and birds, with the exception of those bred for use in research. So they are now included under the AWA and are protected. And so, just a little background, the AWA was signed into law in 1966, and it is the only federal law in the United States that regulates the treatment of animals in research, exhibition, transport, and by dealers. And there are other laws that are just within the states, but most of them, like the general laws, fall under the AWA. And so I want to argue that the AWA actually does not fail to protect animals. And this is a quote from the AWA that says that for standards include the humane handling, care, treatment, and transportation of animals by dealers, research facilities, and exhibitors, for handling, housing, feeding, watering, sanitation, ventilation, shelter from extremes of weather and temperatures, adequate veterinary care, and separation by species when necessary for humane handling, care or treatment of animals, and for exercise of dogs as determined by an attending veterinarian, and for a physical environment adequate to promote the psychological well-being of primates. And I'd also like to prove that these laws are actually being enforced. So the AWA is enforced by APHIS, which stands for Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, as well as the Animal Care, AC, and the Investigative Enforcement Services, IES. And to ensure that the licensees are meeting the AWA standards, APHIS inspectors conduct routine, unannounced inspections of all licensed facilities. Violations of the AWA can lead to penalties, including official warnings, civil penalties, and license suspensions and revocations. So you can see that they are actually inspecting these facilities, and there are serious consequences for not following the AWA. Their third claim was that there are alternative research methods that can be used and that can replace animal experimentation and may even be better. So I would like to counter this by claiming that although there are possible alternatives, they will never adequately replace animal research. So I have a quote from Kara Rogers, and she says that while animal testing is not always the most efficient way to test the toxicity of a chemical or the efficacy of a pharmaceutical compound, it is sometimes the only way to obtain information about how a substance behaves in a whole organism, especially in the case of pharmaceutical compounds. So I know there is some alternative testing where they try doing computer programs or testing like the cells of animals, but animal experimentation really is the only way to see how it affects the creature as a whole. For example, a drug might work fine on a cell in a test tube, but how will it work in a body? A test tube has no blood circulatory system, no liver, no brain, no nervous system at all. A test tube cannot feel pain or get pregnant. We just don't know whether it would work for sure until we try it on a living creature. And I have a quote from Professor Stephen Hawking, and he's a medical researcher, and he said that computers can do amazing things, but even the most powerful computers can't replace animal experiments in medical research.